about 2 years later with Sullivan. Sullivan just turned a year old. It wasn't even a question. It was like, I'm texting my midwife, Angie, to let her know, I'm due in May and we're having a home birth. And we didn't
Mhm.
even know where we would be living because we were trying to sell our home and build another. We were like, we might be in a trailer on some raw land. Like, we have no idea, but we're
Yeah.
having a baby at home. Like, we're not going to the hospital. We will birth in a yurt before we will birth in a hospital again.
Hey, you're listening to Empowered Births at Home with me, Esmeralda, as your host. I am a mama of three, fellow home birther, and doula. I am completely obsessed with birth, more specifically, home birth. And this is the podcast where women come to share their home birth stories, along with the journey that led them down the path to home birth. Whether you're pregnant, planning a home birth with your first or fourth baby, or even is just someone who is a complete birth nerd like me, this is the podcast for you. Let's get right into this week's empowering home birth story.
Hi, so my name is Beka. I'm a mom to three little boys here and then one little boy in heaven. I have had two home births and then two hospital births, one of them being my stillbirth. Let's see, I live in Florida. My husband and I are building a house, so we've been like super busy. But in my spare time, I like to share on Instagram about pregnancy, pregnancy loss, life after pregnancy loss, physiological birth, like basically advocating for all these natural ways of doing motherhood in like the most undisturbed way possible. It's
Mhm.
it's like something that I could talk about like for hours all day long. So yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to hear your story and just see how this episode goes. I really am excited to hear everything.
Yeah.
So, what kind of got you into the home birth world? What was the journey to that decision of having a home birth?
So when I think about it, like I always struggle with like, okay, well, how far back do I have to go? Because it certainly wasn't any like one thing. It was like a full like domino effect of so many things. So to start at like the very, very, very beginning, before I got pregnant with my first, who I had in a hospital, I started working out. I was like, I'm newly married. I want to stay fit and trim. Like, I'm going to work out. And part of working out is the affirmations of like my body is strong, my body is capable. I can expect hard things from my body. So
Hmm.
when we thought about getting pregnant, I was like, wait a minute. It doesn't make sense to suddenly go from that to, oh, I can't give birth. I have to have an epidural. I have to be in a hospital. And it
Hmm.
was just kind of like a passing thought of mine. And I was like, yeah, I probably wouldn't get an epidural because, like, why would I? Like, why do I need that? And then my sister invited me to do cloth diaper because she cloth diapered her babies. And so I got into like a crunchy mom group and they're talking about like, home births and like eating their placentas and breastfeeding their 4-year-olds, like stuff that was so wild to me. I was like, these women are crazy. But home birth, natural birth, and like declining routine hospital interventions was like a regular part of the conversation. And I was just kind of into it. So I had my first birth in the hospital, completely unmedicated, completely unassisted, as in like they didn't do anything. There were no interventions, right? Obviously, I had an OB and a midwife and all the nurses and whatnot, but it was exactly what I wanted at the time. And it was so perfect. We then got pregnant with our second in 2020. And I intended to like go back and do the same kind of birth because I was like, that was part like, why would I look for something new when this was everything I wanted?
Hmm.
Um, and then that pregnancy, unfortunately, that baby died at when I was 19 weeks pregnant.
Hmm.
And so I had to go, this is like height of COVID times. And like I was alone at my appointment when, I found out he'd passed away. I felt like the doctors didn't listen to me as I was telling them, like, hey, something's wrong. So it just started this snowball effect of like, no one's listening to me. Nobody
Hmm.
cares about me. Like I was treated so well in my first pregnancy and my first birth that I was like, anybody can have a beautiful birth in a hospital. I started really advocating for like good hospital births and how like some hospitals are fantastic. And then this experience just like changed all of that. Plus the COVID rules were like wild and they were changing. And I was like, you care about me so little, you won't even let my husband like come pick me up from this appointment. Like you expect me to walk myself out of here after learning that my baby has died. Um,
Mhm.
and so we had to go into the hospital that weekend and I was induced. And again, that was like a really good experience. And nurses were like so empathetic and so wonderful to me. But obviously, it was still just like horrible. And I mean, on top of losing our baby, but also with all the COVID things. So, 4 months after he was born, that was my son Miles, I got pregnant again and still was like, going back to a hospital. I'm going to fight the system. I'm going to decline all the routine interventions just like every time before. And I work for our hospital system in like the billing side. And I'm watching like the announcements of like, oh, COVID cases are rising. So now our staff has to act this way. And now at work, you have to wear your mask. And now at work, you have to do this protocol. And now we're shutting down this part of the hospital and we're not allowing visitors. Like just daily, I'm getting these announcements as I'm creeping closer and closer and closer to my due date with my rainbow baby. So I'm
Mhm.
36 weeks pregnant. And I'm like, I have to prepare to go into the hospital. And at the drop of a hat, they could be like, your husband can't be in here. He cannot come with you. You have to labor in a mask. You can't have a midwife that you're requesting. You have to have, I just had no control and I couldn't stop them if that's what they decided my birth had to look like. So I bumped into my neighbor who had I think her second or third home birth when I had my first in the hospital. And I remember she shared because we have babies the same age, and I'm like trying to sleep train. And she was like, girl, just hold your baby. Like, what's the matter with you? She had, I think, 4 kids older than mine. She's a lot of kids. Um, and when she told me she had a home birth, I was like, that's crazy. Like, you're insane. Like, I didn't have any pain medication either. So it's not like, oh, that's, painful and dangerous. But I was like, that's just weird because now, like, you've got a mess to clean up. And, like, why would you want to do that in your home? Like in a completely different mindset. So I'm 36 weeks pregnant with my third baby, my rainbow baby. And I just kept thinking about her. We were still neighbors, and I'm thinking about her story. And I just text her and I was like, hey, who is your midwife? And like, sell home birth to me. Like, talk me into it, tell me all the things. And I really wrestled with it because I had just gone through a loss. And a lot of moms who walk through loss, they turn to the system for help, for support, for safety. Like they want to be catered to, they want to be protected, they want extra tests and
Mhm.
elective inductions, right? And so I was just like inundated with that message of in your pregnancy after loss, you should do all these extra things, count the kicks, right? Like measure the placenta, all these programs that try to avoid pregnancy loss. And so I was like, if I home birth because I'm scared or nervous to go into a like COVID riddled hospital, am I doing this out of like pride or selfishness? Like, is this the right choice for me? Is this a safe choice for me? I really didn't know. And I didn't know who to talk to because I didn't want to be talked out of it. But I knew that if I brought up, like, I'm considering a home birth and I'm weighing my options to just any normal person, they would probably say, like I would have 4 years prior, that's crazy. Like, don't do that. That's ridiculous. And so, like, I look up the midwife and then I'm wrestling with the financial aspect of it because my hospital birth was covered down to like $1,400 out of pocket. My insurance, again, it's through the hospital. It's really great. The midwife was going to cost, I think she listed on her website at like 42, yeah, 4,200. And I was like, that's such a wildly different number, like 4 times the cost just
Mhm.
so that I don't have to possibly wear a mask in labor. Like, this is really silly. And so my neighbor, I'm telling my neighbor, I'm like, no, I can't afford it. Like, I'm trying to talk myself out of it while asking her to talk me into it. And she's
Mhm.
like, just call her. So I'm working from home one day. Again, I'm 36 weeks pregnant. My husband goes to work and I'm like, all right, I'll call her. And I'll never forget. She's like, hey, I'm just running into the grocery store, but let me call you back. And I'm like, okay, sure. And thinking she probably like she's gonna forget, right? So
Mhm.
20 minutes later, she calls me back and we sat on the phone for an hour and a half. And she just talked to me about birth. And like I was telling her all the things like, well, I don't my body doesn't need the hospital. My body can do this. I know it can. And she was like, of course it can. Like women have been having babies for centuries and, sometimes they need help, but if you don't need help, you don't need help. And it was just
Yeah.
so affirming of everything that I thought I knew, but I didn't really have somebody in my life who shared those feelings really. And I was only just at this point starting out like with my Instagram and connecting with other moms online. And at that point, it wasn't necessarily other home birth moms or, naturally minded moms with podcasts like yours where you can hear all these amazing stories. It was mostly loss and
Mm.
devastation. And now you need the hospital system to like help you save your babies.
Yeah.
So I still wasn't like immersed in that understanding of like physiological birth, home birth. So I was nervous. But after talking to her, I was like, she literally just spent an hour and a half of her time on the phone with me for free, not knowing whether or not I'm going to hire her and turn around and pay her. The price she quoted me for attending my birth was lower than what I had thought it would be. So still higher than my hospital birth. But I was like, it's less than what we paid for our wedding. Like it was a fraction of what we paid for our wedding. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. This kind of seems important. This kind of seems like a big deal. My husband came home from work while I was on the phone with her, right? And so I kind of waved him off. I was like, I'm just talking to a midwife. Like, go away. Don't listen to me. He's like, oh, okay. I hang up the phone and he comes into the room and he goes, we're having a home birth, aren't we? I was like, no, I don't know. I mean, I'm still playing with the idea. And he was like, okay. And I think maybe 4 days later, I was like, I want to have a home birth. And he's like, I already checked our finances because I knew you did. He's like, and later he told me, he's like, I saw it on your face, like the resolve and the peace that you had there. He's like, and I knew you would come to that decision. You just didn't know it yet. And like I processed through with a lot of people, a lot of lost moms, a handful of them who had their own home births after loss, and we just kind of like happened to realize, like I didn't realize it because their message was also more like pregnancy loss focused. So when I started talking about home birth, they're like, oh yeah, I had a home birth. And I was like, what?
Mm.
I didn't know.
Mhm.
Um, and I still chose to like keep it private. I think I might have had about 5,000 followers on Instagram, and they were all like watching my pregnancy with my rainbow baby and asking me questions about like, just pregnancy after loss kind of questions. And I decided to like go through this charade of like packing a hospital bag and like pretending I was preparing to go into the hospital for labor. And then I got COVID. The very week after I booked my midwife, I came down with COVID for the first time and it was horrendous. Like I really thought in my head, I was like, I might be dying. I don't know.
Mhm.
It was such a bad respiratory issue. I have asthma as well. And I remember I was like, if I was under the care of an OB and I got COVID and like needed to be hospitalized or something or needed medication, I know like I would go to my OB and they would send me to labor and delivery and they would treat me because I'm pregnant, number one, and have COVID, number two, right? So that's where I would get treatment. I was like, but I basically just fired them. Now I have a midwife. Does she even care that I have COVID? Like, can she help me? Can she get me medication? Like, I truly didn't know what to do. And I was like, oh no, I think I made the wrong choice because now I'm sick and I'm scared. And I remember I called her and I had an appointment with her like in a couple of days. And I was like, I don't know, but I've got COVID. She was like, okay. And I was like, well, you don't want to come over. She was like, you're my patient. Well, I don't think she called me her patient, but she was like, I'm going to come treat you. Like, you're my client. Like, I'm coming to take care of you. She's like, you're going to have a lot of tea. You're going to, up your vitamin D. You're going to go outside in the sunshine and you're going to rest and relax. And you're not going to freak out. And your baby will not come while you're sick. She's like, you will feel, because I was like, I can't labor like this. Like, I'm so sick. There's no way I could give birth. And she's like, you won't. She's like, you will be better before your baby gets here. I promise. And she was right. But it was just that like loving, mothering, nurturing, not like, oh my gosh, you're sick. Let me quarantine you and treat you like you've got the plague. Like she just wanted to mother me and
Mhm.
like hold me through that. And it was really beautiful and really peaceful. And I think it like bonded me to her forever. She's still like, my friend and like so incredible. But yeah, she was right. So he came like 4 days before his due date, I think. And the peace around like, hey, I'm going into labor. I don't have to rush. I don't have to get anywhere. My husband doesn't have to like plan like a mapped out route of like traffic patterns and like the best time to get through the city, and it was just an overwhelming sense of peace. In fact, I didn't like, I went into labor and I was like, oh, I have to go to the post office. I go to the post office, and the lady's like, oh my gosh, you're huge. When are you due? And I was like, oh, not for like 4 days. She's like, oh, okay. And I was like, but I think I'm in labor. And she was like, oh my gosh, like freaking out, like maybe I would want her to do something. And I was like, no, it's okay. I'm having him at home, and I live just down the street. She was like, you're doing what? I was like, yeah, I'm having him at home. And so I went home and I didn't tell my husband that I was in labor. And this was probably like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was just having like light contractions. And then we brought our oldest home from daycare around 5. And then I remember I was sitting on the floor playing with him and I started to have a contraction. And my husband walks in and he goes, what's happening on your face? He's like, something's going on with you. And I was like, oh, I thought I was hiding it, right? I was like, I think I'm in labor. I'm having a contraction. And he's like, what? Oh my gosh, what do we do? And I was like, nothing. We just like hang out. And we had dinner and we played out in the backyard with our oldest. And I just like listened to music through the evening and we did normal bedtime and we didn't have to like coordinate, oh, who's going to come pick up our oldest? And are they going to have him for 19 hours or for 4 days? We don't know. How long is this going to take? We all just stayed home. And I just think that I was wrapped in so much peace and contentment there that that just carried into my labor. And so we put my oldest son to bed and I went to bed. And I think I woke up around midnight and got in the shower and was just having like light contractions, but they were still like interrupting my sleep and my ability to like sit still and rest. And I got super antsy. I believe so. My husband started timing my contractions, right? But through the last, I guess, 4 weeks, which is not a very long time, but I had started like listening to home birth stories because I was like, well, now I'm having a home birth. So I've got a whole 4 weeks to prepare and like understand how to do this. And a lot of them said, don't time things, don't track things, just turn inward, listen to your body, and wait for like a feeling of, okay, it's, I need help or I want support here, rather than like, oh, my contractions are 511. So let me call somebody. So that's kind of what I committed to do. But he was like in the background tracking my contractions. And he's like, oh,
Yeah.
these are really close together. I was like, yeah, they're close together, but like they're not very intense. I'm moving and I'm swaying through them and maybe vocalizing a little bit, but like I'm having a conversation with you in between. So like this is completely normal. And I that that's basically the last thing I remember, like in this realm from that birth, because again, I just think I was wrapped up in so much peace. And I think I was at the perfect level of like understanding home birth, and how much better it can be than like a systematic hospital birth. But I also wasn't so deep in like the dogma of home birth where I was thinking about like midwife sabotage and information overload of like, oh, what position is my baby in? And do I need to do a spin babies? Do I need to do a mile circuit? Right? Like in my head, I was like, I'm doing this the most natural and most perfect way possible. Nothing can go wrong, which
Yeah.
I know is not true, but that was what was true for me. And like, that's just what consumed me through this entire time. And so I never had a concern of like, I can't do this. He's not going to fit. He's too big. He's in the wrong position. It's taking too long. Like, I had zero questions. I was like, I'm at home. I'm at peace. My body's done this before. It's going to do it again. I've got a midwife here in case anything goes wrong. So I like truly left the conscious world at that point. And most of what I remember from after that is because my husband was telling me about it. Um, but he's like, I don't know, something you just changed. And like, you stopped talking to me. And I asked if you wanted to call the midwife, and you were still saying no, but like, I didn't know what else to do. He's like, so I called her and then I asked if you wanted to talk to her and you wouldn't talk to her. And even my midwife is like, if the laboring mom calls me, it's probably too early. But if the dad calls me and is like, she can't talk right now, I'm probably coming over. So
Yeah.
she came over, I think around 3 o'clock in the morning. Again, he was 4 at the time. He's sleeping in the other room, just like sleeping through it all. I was in and out of the shower. I was like leaning over the side of the bed. And every time a contraction would come, like I wanted my husband there so I could really like hold his hand to kind of like pull against him. And once, like a couple of times in between contractions, I kind of like came lucid again and was just kind of like, oh my gosh, there's people in my house. Like there's a midwife over here. Who's that over there? Oh, that's the midwife assistant. Oh, okay, cool. And I was like, I feel weird. Like you guys are all just hanging out and I'm just chilling, like doing nothing basically. I was like, I feel like I should get up and like host you guys or make you coffee or like do some chores or something. I don't know. Because in between contractions, I felt so good and like normal, like nothing was right. Then another contraction would come and I would like slip out of consciousness again and work through that contraction and then come back and be like, so what's going on, everybody? It was just the weirdest experience because I didn't get that in the hospital, even though I was unmedicated, I was mostly undisturbed, right? But there was still like panic all over the birth, and I was like freaking out, and I was like, this is hard, and why is it taking so long as a first time mom? And I remember we had a bathtub. And at one point, my husband's like, hey, do you want me to fill the bathtub and you can get in? I was like, oh, no, gross. No, I want to stay right here, right by the bed. And I remember like the fetal ejection reflex kicked in and my waters broke and his head was born like back to back contractions. And then everything went quiet. And
Mhm.
I remember like I was holding his head in my hands and I was like, I don't know what to do anymore. What do I do? Like I'm not done, but everything has stopped. Like it just shut down. I was like, what do I do? And my midwife said when she heard that, she actually, I guess my husband told me this. He's like, Angie looked at me and just like nodded her head. She made eye contact with my husband and just like nodded. And then she said she watched the baby like perfectly rotate. And then he like slid out behind me because I was on my knees. And she caught him and then like passed him up between my legs to me. And then her midwife, her assistant, like took a couple of pictures that I still have. And like it's just really cool because I'm just sitting there with like blood all over my legs and like the umbilical cord and this like tiny, like bloody baby in front of me. Just like that's it. And it was so calm. And during it, like I know I was making noise and I know I was verbalizing, like calling out for John and like holding him and squeezing him really tight. But exactly at that moment, like when my baby was born and I came back into my body, I was like, that was nothing. I don't feel like I did any work. There was no pain. There was no remembrance of like, oh my goodness, I really struggled there. But both of my other home birth was not the same. Like I have very clear moments of like I struggled here and I struggled there and this was really hard and this was really painful. So to like when I talk about this birth, I'm like this was a pain-free birth because there were so many sensations, yes, and intensity, yes, but ultimately I had zero fear again because I wasn't thinking like, oh my gosh, this midwife is going to try to like pull my placenta out of my body or she's going to put her hands on my baby or the perfect song isn't going to be playing on my playlist when he's born, like all those things that I think we see on Instagram sensationalized. And so we think like, oh, I want that in my birth and I don't want this and I don't want this. And we make up a laundry list of like what we do and don't want. And then we just like hyper focus on that through our entire labor. I didn't have any of that. I was just like,
Yeah.
I'm not in a hospital. I don't have an IV in my arm. I'm not wearing a mask. Like, no
Mhm.
one's gonna start poking my baby with all kinds of things, or try to take him away from me or test him for COVID. Like, this is it. We're just at home. And I remember I put a picture on Instagram the next day and I was like, oh, hey, we did a thing last night. And everybody was like, you had him at home? Was that on purpose? Like, what happened? Thinking I just didn't make it to the hospital. And I was like, oh no, surprise. Like, we planned this. I just didn't want to tell anybody. And that was my son, Dempsey. And he is almost 4. He'll be 4 in August. And it was like just such an incredible experience that I really think restored my faith in my body. And
Mhm.
after having walked through a loss and just like it healed so much of what I lost when Miles died and when, you know, the my body was treated like it was a walking time bomb. Actually, that's something when I was with my OB and I was getting care for my rainbow baby and I was approaching, 35 weeks or so. He starts into like, you need weekly non-stress tests, which as somebody who understands how physiological birth works and spontaneous labor, and I didn't want any interventions or inductions, I knew that that was kind of like a recipe for disaster, like the start of the cascade of interventions. And I told him, I was like, I'm not interested in any non-stress tests. Like I can feel the baby moving. If I have a concern, I will call you. And he was like, ooh, that's just not a good idea. Based on the outcome of your, or the unfavorable outcome of your last pregnancy, that's not a good idea. And I was like, the baby that I'm carrying, first of all, I'm well beyond the point where we lost Miles. Second of all, they're not connected. Like there wasn't any markers or precursors or anything that happened to Miles that caused his death that we could point to say, like, this is what we're trying to avoid. But he was so desperate to just like connect them. And then I
Yeah.
told him no. And he's like, well, I recommend it. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, as forcefully as I could while still trying to be really polite, he like just
Mhm.
wouldn't hear me. And I left and I was like, okay, I'll schedule one, but I'm not scheduling weekly. And so I went to the front desk girl and she was like picky about the schedule and, oh, well, he says you have to. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And even my husband's like, it's not her fault. Like, don't get mad at her. She's just doing her job. And I was like, no one's listening to me. And that was
Mhm.
kind of the start of like, I don't want to have this baby here in a hospital with somebody who doesn't trust me and just sees my baby as like an unfortunate outcome,
Mhm.
and it's going to treat me differently. So I know it's really rare, certainly not unheard of because I've connected with a lot of moms who've done this, but it's more rare to like go through loss and then leave the hospital system and do more of like a hands off home birth, but it's really where I feel like I found a lot of my voice again and my trust in my body and birth and like the perfect miraculous design of mothers and babies, even though my second baby didn't make it.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was that home birth. And then when I got pregnant again about 2 years later with Sullivan just turned a year old. It wasn't even a question. It was like, I'm texting my midwife, Angie, to let her know, I'm due in May and we're having a home birth. And we didn't
Mhm.
even know where we would be living because we were trying to sell our home and build another. We were like, we might be in a trailer on some raw land. Like, we have no idea, but we're
Yeah.
having a baby at home. Like, we're not going to the hospital. We will birth in a yurt before we will birth in a hospital again. And his birth, I don't have to go into all the details. I mean, it was pretty straightforward, but I did have a little bit more of like, okay, so I became a doula. And so I had a lot of experience with other women's births, like seeing their stories. I got into podcasts like the Free Birth Society, where they talk about, again, midwife sabotage and like, oh, free birth is the superior birth now, not just home birth, which is fine
Yeah.
if that's what a woman chooses. I've never felt called to a free birth, though I've supported one as a doula, but it was still like in my head, like, is my midwife suddenly going to sabotage me? Is she suddenly going to stop listening? Like, I've known her for 4 years and suddenly, right, she's going to flip on me and serve her license instead of me as her laboring mom. And then I was like, maybe baby's in the weird position. My contractions are feeling this kind of a way and that kind of a way. So maybe like, oh, I haven't had an emotional release yet. So maybe baby's not coming because I just these little things that as a doula you think about or you suggest to your client. I was like doulaing myself.
Yeah.
I also hired a photographer, which was incredible, but it was another person like watching me. She wanted to chit chat because we're friends. And, I was like, I just want to kind of like slip away from this world. But she's like asking me what kind of music I want, and so it was not a bad experience at all, but it was just different. Oh, and I also like kind of forced myself into a water birth because I wanted to know what that was like. Maybe it's easier, maybe it's better. And again, everything was fine. It was absolutely beautiful. But in hindsight, because I wasn't called to a water birth. I feel like I struggled a little bit. It slowed things down. I wanted to get out, but I was like, but if I get out now, suddenly the pressure is so intense. And I haven't like built up to that intensity because I've been sitting in this bathtub for 3 hours.
Mhm.
And so there were more moments in Sullivan's birth where I was like, this is too hard. I can't do this. He's not going to come out. My whole body's going to split in half and he's just going to like tear out of me like an alien, And I needed a lot more like mental and emotional support, like grounding that I really didn't need in Dempsey's birth because I was like, whatever the best version of this is, that's what I'm doing right now. Whereas with Sullivan's, it was like at the back of my head, I was like, oh, this could be better if I did it alone. This could be better if I didn't
Yeah.
have anybody watching me. But he was born in the water. The labor, it was kind of the same time frame. Like I went into labor around, I think, 5 p.m. I called my photographer around 2 and the midwife around 4. And he was born at like 8 a.m., I think. And my husband, he hated the water birth, first of all, because he's like, as soon as your waters broke, he's like, it's like a shark, or no, he's like, somebody just like chummed the waters. And it was like a shark attack, just like pieces of stuff and like blood and like fluids. And he said, you kept putting your hands in the water because I was like feeling for the baby. He's like, then you would try to touch me with your hands from the bath water. He's like, I just didn't want you to touch me. And then you just sat in it for hours. He's like, it was so gross. And so in hindsight, I was like, well, I probably wouldn't do that again anyway. But yeah, it was very incredible. And I'm glad that I got to do a water birth because I was curious about it. But that was definitely not a pain-free birth like my last one had been. And I really just think it was a different headspace because again, the photographer, my platform online that grew, and so many more people that were like invested in following my pregnancy and like the amount that I was sharing about what we were doing and such. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, those are my births, and they're all so different, but like
Mhm.
each one of them is so incredible. And God, I just love to tell these stories.
Yeah, amazing. You have such beautiful stories. I'm so glad you got to share them today.
Thank you. Me too.
I do have one question. If there is something that you've learned from all of your experiences that you've gone through, what is kind of like one thing you would share with someone who is maybe planning like their first home birth and has never gone through this journey before?
One thing, oh my gosh, it probably has to be something about like just surrendering to nature's chaos. I stole that quote from Dr. Stu from Birthing Instincts, but like because moms have some moms like they get this notion of like, oh, go with the flow, which means like whatever they tell me to do, whatever my provider wants, I'm just gonna go with the flow because I can't predict it, I can't control it. But like that's not exactly it. It's like you have to just surrender to nature's chaos and like the natural flow of your birth, which is going to include like your intuition and what your body is craving or asking for. And I think a lot of moms silence that in favor of like what the professionals say.
Mhm.
And so that would be it. Like just learn to surrender to that and learn to hear that. Because a huge part of my story from losing Miles was like my intuition was friggin' unlocked, like in ways that I could never have imagined.
Mhm.
And it's because I had so much intuition about how he would die and like that he would die, and then
Mhm.
he did. And I have like tangible proof that I was right and that my intuition was real and that it was spot on. Like I have journal entries from before he died that I wrote that I can compare to like my
Mhm.
experience. So I don't have to sit and guess like, oh, did I really have intuition or am I just making it up? Like,
Mhm.
and that intuition, like I leaned into it and I told myself like this is real and this can be trusted. And it has served me so well in my next two births. Um, and I just wish I could help every single other mother like unlock that and be like, it's real. Like
Mhm.
mother's intuition, woman's intuition, it's there and you have it. We've just silenced it for so long. So
Mhm.
that would be it. And I think unlocking it starts with just like surrendering, like just letting go of trying to control things and trying to like make things follow this expert plan.
Mhm.
Yeah. surrendering to nature's chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
And so if anyone wants to find you or connect with you, see more about your stories, see more pictures, where can they find you?
I am primarily on Instagram. My handle is becca.xo.co. I also have a website. It's beccaxo.com. And on there, I've got, my doula services, also some online doula services that I offer. My podcast is there. My blog is there. I have a couple of digital resources, one specifically for lost moms who are just working through like grief and trying to figure out how to move forward in life with their grief. A couple of other like small products, but yeah, beccaxo.com and then on Instagram at becca.xo.co.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and link those below. So anyone who wants to go ahead
Yeah,
and follow you, they can do that.
thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you have this platform where I can share and other moms can just like find these stories. So thank you for inviting me.
As a doula, I serve women who want to have a physiological and intuitive birth. Women who are ready to take radical responsibility for their birth and want to be the authority in their birth. This is not a job or career for me. This is much bigger, something deeper. This is soul work, my ultimate passion, because I trust women and I trust birth. I have both in-person and virtual offerings available, including birth services, birth circles, courses, mentorships, freebies, and much more. For more information on everything that I offer, the link is down below in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd love for you to share with any family or friends who may benefit from these stories and experiences. To further support this podcast, I'd appreciate if you would leave a 5-star rating and review, or you can even make a loving donation on my website at birthsathome.com/products/podcast-donation. Tune in next week for another home birth story.